I grew up in Kolkata, where during the run-up to every Durga Puja, there would be an exhibition of export surplus apparel. I was in school when Gokul Das first came into our lives. And then, while in college, in the mid-90s, a new company, Vishal Retail, took over an old single-screen iconic cinema theatre called Tiger and started doing the same. So, you again had mountains of clothes, latest fashion, Firang brands that were otherwise unavailable or very, very expensive. Banana Republic shirts, I remember, were a big hit. But the mantra for success was the price point. They were all cheaper by 50, sometimes even by 70%. That was my first brush with value retail as well, and the Vishal plans of Vishal Retail. But that became its double-edged sword. Very soon the company became highly indebted, a bloated balance sheet and bankruptcy knocking at its door. In 2010, debt-ridden Vishal Retail had to be sold for a paltry 70 crore to private equity group TPG along with Shriram Group. 8 years down the line, the company changed hands again. This time around, it was bought by another private equity consortium, Partners Group and Kedaara Capital, for around 5,000 crores. On Wednesday, Vishal, now called Vishal Mega Mart, got listed. Guess what? There was a 40% pop. At the end of day one, the company's market value was over 50,000 crore rupees. This is what I call a turnaround, a Vishal turnaround. It's Thursday, December 19th. You're listening to the Economic Times podcast, The Morning Brief. I'm your host, Arijit Barman. Over the next 1 hour or so, we will chat with some of the key actors responsible for this turnaround. Men who braved COVID, cynics, as well as conformists to make the story work. Gunender Kapur, MD and CEO of Vishal Mega Mart, right from 2010, if I'm not mistaken. Nishant Sharma, founder and managing partner, Kedaara Capital. And Tandon, partner with the Partners Group. Gentlemen, thank you all for taking time out and joining our podcast.
Thank you, Arijit.
Thank you,
Kapur
Arijit.
Saab, I'll start with you. How many times have you checked your phone to see the stock price movement today?
I would guess about 100.
At least it's an honest answer.
Okay, that's good. So, how was day zero or day one? You've been on road shows for months and now today was the big day.
It was a pleasant surprise in many different ways. The biggest, of course, was what you mentioned, that we had a pop of 40-odd% on the listing day, which was tremendous. It's a tremendous sign of confidence from the investors. Equally, it's a big responsibility for the company to live up to the expectations which are embedded in those numbers. Equally, it was very good for me to come together with my partners because we do that once in a while. And it's very reassuring that you are in the company of people who are totally aligned with you in every which way. And that focus of alignment is something called Vishal. And I'm feeling both great and emotional at this moment.
All of you deserve this, no doubt. But I remember you telling me people's aspirations in India are going up. But so is the income gap. Is that where Vishal comes in?
Well, Vishal comes in even before that. Of course, that as a fact is absolutely true. With the digital penetration going up, the aspirations are going up exponentially. But I think at a more fundamental level, we recognize the fact that fast fashion, which you can call fashion in general, is something which is terribly relevant for young people. And India is a young country. So that's the obvious opportunity. But the challenge with young people is that the affordability is somewhat lower. So while we can choose to call it value retail, I choose to call our business a fast fashion business. And obviously, we would price it at a level where our target customers can afford to buy our fashion.
We'll talk about fast fashion in detail because it is quite a buzzword these days. But Nishant, I want to understand one thing, which is everybody wants to address Bharat, right? But the Bharat consumption story is not easy. Why I'm saying this is because the average ticket size tends to be smaller compared to big cities. The sales per square foot in Bharat is generally low. So how do you address, this need yet be make a business case out of it?
No, it's a great question, Arjit. I think Vishal is a classic example of that, where I think if you're able to truly cater to the needs of Bharat, so the reason why the economics work, and actually it works better than most big box retail, is because you're able to offer a compelling assortment to the customer who therefore chooses to spend a larger share of their budget with you versus whatever the option may be. It could be a street vendor, it could be another organized retailer, but just because the value proposition is so strong, it leads to superior box economics. The return on capital, which is 70+%. You look at several sort of years of and quarters of data, it's been quite consistent.
Can I just very quickly add one thing, Arijit? One of the first stories that GK mentioned when we were engaged in our conversations was, he said, Manas, always remember that you can afford to buy many shirts in a year. My customer can only buy one shirt a year. And so it better be a damn good shirt.
I think there's no questions asked returns policy. I mean, which I would say most of India, especially the upper middle income India, high income India, you would imagine that people would just return stuff in droves. I mean, that trust is a two-way street, right? And here it's no questions asked, right? And Vishal, that's been, the value proposition from day one, which, GK has talked about.
Yeah. But I mean, to make this economics work, Manas, you also have to be razor sharp or razor focused vis-a-vis costs or keeping costs at a bare minimum. How does that work out for someone like Vishal?
I would say 3 or 4 things, right, that come off the top of my mind. Location is important, right? I mean, just the sheer focus of GK and team. Like, if I remember correctly, GK, we used to pay 43 rupees a square foot of rent 6 years ago, and it's in the same ballpark
It's
today.
in the same ballpark.
6 years later.
6 years later.
Right? And GK will maybe talk about some of this, but the shrink numbers that we see in our stores are the lowest, among the lowest in the world.
Yeah.
What do you mean by a shrink number?
GK, would you like to explain that?
Basically, theft.
Okay.
And that's very interesting point that Manas has made. With a very liberal return policy, as Nishant and Manas spoke about. And that's basically because we recognize that when we sell 250 million pieces of garment, as we are going to do this year, I mean, that's a lot of garments, probably amongst the highest in the country in terms of volume, there is a slim possibility that something can slip through the quality check system. It's to recognize that upfront and say that it can happen, although the probability is small. If it were to happen, still we don't want that one customer to suffer the consequences of having bought something which is not great quality. So despite that liberal return policy, our shrink numbers track at about 0.5 to 0.6%, which, as MT said, is amongst the lowest. Now, this is just to say that if you respect people in a genuine and authentic way, you get rewarded in many different ways.
So you don't buy this argument that, often repeated that, oh, you're doing business in North India, all this shrink issues or, customers misbehaving and, you're going to face a hell of a lot of problems. You never faced that?
No, in fact, I would believe that if we were to overreact to that issue, we would start misbehaving with our customers. For example, to reduce the shrink, if I make all my customers queue up at the exit and start checking each
Their
item
bags.
in their bag, they are not misbehaving with us, but we have started misbehaving with them. So that is definitely not something which I would ever do.
Yeah.
As I said, if you show respect, you are rewarded.
I'm sure people told you, कि क्या कर रहे हो आप? From Unilever, Reliance, and now Vishal. Have you gone mad? I mean, I'm sure you faced this question.
Well, it's the answer in my head is very obvious. Unilever is a great company. And I would say that I have learned a lot from Unilever. I worked with some of the greatest leaders in certainly in Indian business, maybe globally in businesses. People like Dr. Ganguly, Mr. Datta, Keki Dadi Seth, Vindi Banga, and Kasturi Rangan, and so on. But then, to me personally, I wasn't quite certain if I were to not enjoy the legacy of what's been done by great leaders like them and several before that. I wasn't quite sure whether I was good enough to really say that, I've learned and I can do it all my own. Till the time I did something which is somewhat on my own. Even if it were to be a small pawn shop, I wanted to do it to prove to myself that I have indeed learned and I have indeed, been able to use that learning to do it
Create something of my own.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the greatest joy and the greatest pain in the world is the process of creation, both joy and pain.
Now, Manas talked about, controlling costs and how you do it. There is also an element which people from the outside don't see, which is the back end. And that's where a lot of focus, the supply chain, the buying and procurement, all that also plays a big role, right, in controlling costs.
Of course. And I will take you through with some examples backwards from the store to the sourcing. Now, at the store, our endeavor at every stage is to ensure it's not that we run a cost which is dramatically different. It is just that we incur the cost when we have customers in the store, and we do not incur the cost when we do not have customers in the store. So we have variabilized the cost. It's as simple as the fact that in the morning hours, when there's daylight and there are no customers in the store typically, or less customers in the store, we have alternate lights on because we need less lighting at that point in time. And likewise, you can extend that logic to air conditioning and so on and so forth. And the way you think about staffing, because when you have people who are checking out, you need cashiers. When you don't have so many people checking out, you don't need so many cashiers and so on. Now, moving one step back, if you were to look at our supply chain, we have a big warehouse near Gurgaon because most of our sourcing is done from that area. We move our stock in very large trucks to what we call as regional warehouses. Why very large trucks? Because they are more efficient in terms of cost per unit. In the regional warehouses, we basically break that big bulk into smaller trucks, which do a milk run to all our big stores every day in the morning. Now, why do we take that trouble? We take that trouble because in the warehouses, our rental is 10 rupees per square foot. If we were to keep that stock in the store, then the rental is 60 rupees per square foot. So we would rather keep it at 10 rupees per square foot, ship it every day in the morning to ensure that the availability is 100%, but there is no cost being incurred in terms of rental, very expensive rental in terms of keeping that stock. So that's the supply chain. Now, sourcing, it's always our endeavor to create the virtuous cycle of scale where you sell more, therefore buy better, which is better quality, cheaper, and then pass on the benefit of that to our customers of that better sourcing so that you can continue with the virtuous cycle, keep investing in things like pricing and so on. So you would see with these examples that working backwards from the store, at every stage we do things which commonsensically are good from the first principle. So I would not use the word rocket science at all in it.
But Nishant, equally important is the product mix, right? So, I mean, your 48% of your revenues come from apparel, I think 28 odd percent from general merchandise and 23 from FMCG. Is that a conscious choice because to improve margins and make it more value accretive?
No, absolutely. I think it's been a conscious choice from day one.
Yeah.
Initially when I think GK inherited the business, it was predominantly apparel. And given the opportunity that I think Vishal was seeking, it made sense to have a bulk of it in apparel, but also in FMCG and in GM, because at the end of the day, there are multiple customer segments. There are families who are coming to shop. So you want to give them value, not just in apparel, but also in GM, which is furnishings, footwear, crockery, but also in packaged food in many ways, right? Where you have brands who are at a certain price point, where we're offering our own Vishal private brands, at a much, much more compelling value, right? So therefore the ability, for us to manage our pricing architecture across these three categories is much, much more.
But Manas, FMCG gives you the volumes, right? That's what brings the traffic in the store. Am I correct?
I think to some extent you are correct, right? Like the way GK and team always describe the business is, if you go to a typical Vishal store, you'll have 3 floors. You will typically have FMCG on the top floor. So a lot of people who may not even enter the store thinking that we'll buy apparel. I mean, for me, the biggest joy sometimes when I go to a Vishal store is when I see people pick up our own brands.
Today 73% of our revenue is from private brands, which means, and if you account for the fact that they are typically 30 to 50% cheaper than the third party brands, then therefore the volume share is obviously significantly higher than 73% value share, which means that I'm making up this number, but it may not be hugely off the mark, that 85% plus of our customers are buying our brands. Because if you translate 73% value to volume, that is what it ends up being.
Yeah.
We are the first company in India, to the best of my knowledge, which understands that for small babies, moms need fabric which is 100% safe. We have launched organic for small babies and we've now extended it to kids. To the best of my knowledge, nobody's done that so far.
But how did you pick this team to make this, because you talk so much of emphasis going into design, into, the product itself. How did that evolve? Was it like only in the last 8 years, or it's been a journey which started from day one when you came into the picture?
So, I would credit people like Nishant and Manas for egging us on for getting us started. Because, clothing is at times seen to be a bit of a gamble business where you trust a few people and you believe that they will get it right somehow because they know it and buy fashion for the next season and so on and so forth. And they kept using the word with me, do you have a codified process? And first I understood what that meant. And then
What does that mean?
Oh, actually,
Codified process.
they wanted a computer program which
Okay.
ensures that we buy apparel, which results in full price sell through, right? Without there being any gamble in that or any probability there. And then we got on to developing a codified process. We wanted a process which ensured that with every piece of garment, we would be at least 95% right. With people's flair and so on, it would become 100 or 102. But even if we have, let's say, people who all go on leave all of a sudden, we would get it 95% right. And a large part of our success, actually, I would say most of our success, is a result of that challenge.
But earlier fashion would change in season. Now it changes literally in weeks. It's very easy to say fast fashion, but what goes behind the scenes to make fast fashion work is incredible hard work. How do you do that? Because fashion keeps changing.
Yeah. So, for example, most of our big stores get new fashion almost every day of the year.
Every day
Every day of the year. The big stores. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about all the stores. And, that is stemming from the fact that young people need to look fashionable and different every day. So that's how the entire need for fast fashion started. In India, it has a slightly different connotation as compared to the West, because in the West, fast fashion is also the phenomenon where things have become so cheap that you can wear and throw continuously. In India, we are probably culturally not very comfortable doing that. So you'd find that the fast fashion in India, in terms of quality, is probably better than other places in the world. So that's how fast fashion came about. And it'll continue to be relevant for young people, I suppose.
Wanted to share a story because GK, mentioned this. I remember very much in the beginning of our journey when we started, just out of curiosity, there was a lot of work we all did around apparel in particular, to this codification example. And I think the more you try to figure out the science of fashion, there were examples of businesses like Boohoo and ASOS, which is as seen on screen. And they were using this tool called Edited, right? Which we now use as well in Vishal, which is essentially sort of, something which helps us identify trends world over. That's obviously one element of the input, but there are multiple inputs, as GK was describing, which go into figuring out what is selling, what could be potential bestseller, and therefore then how do you replicate that quickly, in an agile manner to be able to cater to the customers.
And how many times do you get it right and how many times do you get it wrong?
No, maybe GK, you should answer that
Yeah,
question.
you see, you will definitely get it wrong a few times. But then if you look at your supply chain, there are the historical supply chain in clothing works in the following manner. You buy for the full season, and then you sell your best merchandise, let's say in March, the first month of spring season. So therefore, in April, your quality is slightly lesser than March. Then you sell your second best lot in April, and therefore your quality in May is lesser than March and April. We don't do it in that fashion. We buy all our options in very small quantities to begin with, and then keep multiplying the bestsellers and keep killing the slow movers very early.
Yeah.
So if you can visualize it every month, our inventory becomes better than the previous month because there is more of bestsellers and less of slow movers. To the extent that mostly by the end of the season, we don't even feel the need for doing any end of season sale, etc.
I remember also when I met you in your office, it was fascinating to see there was a French lady who I think is the brain behind a lot of the Indian fashion that comes out of Vishal. Is that because she's, I think, still part of the Vishal and has been with Vishal for a long time?
Oh, she's been with us since 2017. And she's a fashion, if I may use the term fashion guru in fast fashion from Europe, which, as you know, is probably one of the most competitive markets. And fashion from Europe travels to all the globe, including America, Japan, and so on and so forth. And Anne came to India. Her first day in India was when she joined Vishal in 2017. So she had not been to India before that. And you saw her, I think you spoke with her in the office. She's as much Indian as at least I
Yeah,
am.
and she was saying this is the Deepika Padukone look,
Correct.
this is the Priyanka Chopra look, this is the Ghagra.
There you
Truly,
are.
that in that film, this is what Ranveer wore.
Yeah.
She wasn't talking about denims or she wasn't
No.
talking about suits. She was talking about Indian wear.
Yeah.
And Anne is in stores with her team every Monday, right? Not just our stores, even other stores, right? Looking at what is selling, what's working. I mean, funny story. I called Anne on Friday after the IPO got oversubscribed. And interestingly, I mean, the tone on the other side felt very, sort of subdued. I said, Anne, are you excited? I mean, it's oversubscribed. I'm in the middle of a collections review, right? So it just typifies the personality that she is. She was fully immersed in her work, ready for what was going to happen next day morning.
I'll draw your attention to another set of numbers, which is very important. It's very easy to roll out new stores, expand. But what is also very important is same store sales growth. For you, it's at 14% in FY24, which is, I think, better than most of your peers. Many of them don't report it. but what's published, apples to apples, you're far better. How do you crack that code?
So, GK, I'll take the first crack at this, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, firstly, Arijit, if you were looking at, the gold standard of same store sales growth globally is 5%. 14% is really special. It's really
But that's
special.
because of a low base effect, or
No, these are, I mean,
the
you have 8-year-old, we look at it by vintage,
okay.
right? We analyze this by vintage because we don't want the base effect to impact this, right?
It's even
But
more than 10 years old.
yeah,
Yeah.
even like 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old stores are growing very fast. I don't know, GK, if there's any
No,
other
that's
stat.
absolutely correct
Yeah.
because your revenue is capped by the number of people you can check out, which is capped by the amount of merchandise you can display. So if you convert 20% of storage into display space where people can buy from, your revenue goes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember especially between 22 and 23, FY23, input prices were going up, right? Across the board, 30% to 50% on average. In several of the key, whether it's cotton, plastics,
Sunflower oil, wheat
sunflower oil,
flour.
correct. You didn't actually, hike prices. Many of the other retailers and producers did. So was that something that you had to do to disrupt the market?
Oh, no, no, no. No, I would be very honest. I mean, that the goal is never been to disrupt anything or anyone, but in all our engagement with the customers, and we do engage with our customers a lot, we found that the customers were getting really badly hit by food inflation at that point in time, because that was the time of Ukraine crisis, if you would remember. Now, at a time when the customers are getting badly hit, in our judgment, wasn't the best time to take a price increase. But what we also did is that we cut our cost to bare bones. I'll just give you one somewhat comical example to make the point. So we removed the cartons from the shoes and we started tying shoes with the laces. And again, the outer carton was also eliminated. And we used to put shoes in gunny bags, which are popularly called boris, and were shipped from the factories to our stores in boris. And we found that they don't get damaged because, I mean, they're like leather or whatever. So that practice still continues. So we are not putting our shoes in cartons anymore. But I'll be honest to state that we could not mitigate the entire extent of cost increase. I think we mitigated about 100 to 150 basis points. And for the rest, we took a hit on our margins. But my personal opinion is that we did right.
But now when you become a public company, does it become that much more difficult? Because quarter on quarter, analysts will judge you, the markets will judge you. It's a very different.
But Arijit, you have to innovate your way out of those challenges rather than take the easy path of, okay, the easiest path is increase prices and then
Increase
see where
prices.
it goes,
I mean,
right?
Yeah.
But I think just going back to every crisis is an opportunity. I'll give you 2 examples, okay? This whole inflationary environment, our own brands, the advantage of having our own brands
Yeah.
really shown in that period of time, right? Because a lot of customers started saying the mango juice that Vishal has is very good, right? The kajus that sell under the Vishal brand are very good. The pickles, everything, right? I mean, it was amazing because a lot of people, and that's what allowed us to absorb a lot of the inflation,
Yeah.
right?
I'll tell you a story here.
Yeah.
Because this is becoming too intellectual now. So during, this is 4 or 5 years ago, and it's a true story. Before Diwali, I was visiting a store in Karol Bagh, and one elderly gentleman, he came to me and he said, are you Mr. Kapur? So I said, yes, I am. How can I help you? So he said, I want to give you a piece of advice. I don't know for sure, but he was looking like a retired civil servant. And I said, of course, I would be very glad if you tell me if you can do anything better. He said, this shirt that you're selling, if I'm not mistaken, it's good quality material. I said, yes, everything is good quality. And the shirt is somewhat more expensive. It's 599 or 699 rupees. It is good quality. And he said, you're giving buy one, get one free on this. So I said, yes, we are. So he said, you should not do that. Do not give buy one, get one free. So I said, well, that's a very surprising piece of advice from you. Normally, our customers love to get buy one, get one free. He said, you see, Mr. Kapur, I also like that promotion, but I don't want your company to shut one more time now. I think it's very difficult for you to be able to afford this. So, for the sake of customers like me, please increase the price or do not give buy one get one free.
It's amazing.
Amazing
Amazing.
story.
Amazing.
So
But you also told me another story that there was a little girl who had come to your store and she
That
told her
steam
mother
iron.
about the steam
I
iron.
know, I told you that.
And that mom, we can afford one, and now my uniform,
Yeah.
we can iron it at home.
So you see, we had launched steam irons, which are obviously better than dry irons. And we had launched at a price of $4.99. So I saw it myself in the store that she was with her mom and very bright, young,
Sprightly.
maybe, yeah, lean, very energetic girl, would be probably 8 to 10 years old. And she was telling her mom, she was saying, you know, mommy, even we can buy this, $4.99, steam iron.
But let's look at the growth that's taking place. A national footprint, 645 stores across 414 cities. If I'm not mistaken, 8 years ago, you were adding 25 to 30 stores a year. Now it's roughly around 75 stores. Has the average store payback gone up?
The average, so we track that number, as you can imagine, by vintage, like a hawk, right? Because to us, people say a lot of questions even during the road shows were about sales per square foot and other things. And we say the number that really matters is return on capital. Right? How fast are the stores paying back? And also the second number that really matters is what's the white space like, right? And I would say those are the two things. And frankly, I mean, I think Nishant made this point earlier. GK made this point earlier about apparel only for like we have such an amazing product depth that we have the ability to experiment. Right. So depending on earlier we used to say we will only open stores in population centers above a certain number. Right. Now we are actually able to go deeper because we have that product depth where we can say why should customers in the smaller towns, jisko hum bolte hain kasbe and like smaller cities, why should they not get access to our product? Right. So all of that is an important part of our journey ahead, right? On the growth side.
A store capex payback is 19 months today with the 60 to 80 stores that we open, which is the shortest in Indian retail. Basically, it means that if we put X rupees into opening a store, that X rupees we recover from the store profit or EBITDA in 19 months' time, which is the shortest in Indian retail.
And that boils into the 70% plus return on capital that you see, right?
Nishant, you've grown up in a big city like Delhi. You work in a big city like Mumbai. When you were first checking out Vishal, you were about to invest, did you actually go on a road trip and check out stores? What was your experience like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think at that time, there were about 200 odd stores, right? And between our teams, we probably visited maybe 60, 70 stores in different markets, right? Luckily, Delhi NCR has always had a high density of Vishal stores in various catchments. So I've grown up in Janakpuri, which is, West Delhi. So a store in Vikaspuri, there's a store in Uttam Nagar, Dwarka. So those were all within, vicinity, which, became sort of the milk run equivalent that GK described for goods dispatch. I did a milk run to visit all the stores, looking at not just Vishal stores, but also competition stores, right? That was something which the team, when we sort of spoke to the store managers, the customer associates, they were tracking it like a hawk every day, right? The interactions with the customers. We went at different times when it was a lean period, busy period during 6 to 11 in the evening. The consistency with which the conversations were happening, the rigor of, the day in the life of a store manager, day in the life of a store associate. There were just many stories which made us, gave us a lot of confidence on how the process is going back to this codification point. Because, you can do it when you have 10 stores, 20 stores, but when you go from 200 to 600 stores, it has to be codified so that at the last mile, it can happen with precision.
Yeah.
Right. GK, UP, Karnataka, and Assam are your top 3 contributing states. Now, how different is a customer in UP versus a customer in Assam versus a customer in Karnataka? And how similar are they?
So, firstly, I'll say that, these states are big for some very obvious reasons. For example, Assam, every retailer does well because Assam is very distribution difficult. And basically, the district headquarter towns feed the entire district. So, these are all called feeder markets. Assam and Northeast are all feeder markets. UP is the highest population place. So it's again one of the important things that we look at is population density. That is quite high in UP. And Karnataka is quite ahead in terms of the density of organized retail. The culture of shopping in organized retail is very well established, and we've achieved great success there. On your second question, I would express a personal opinion, but it's can be challenged. Retail thrives on similarities amongst people. It has to somehow deal with the differences through use of technology. Let me give you an example. We, for example, don't do saris because saris are very different in each place in India. For example, TN and Calcutta are like chalk and cheese in terms of saris. We do, let's say, ladies' western clothing. Now, Manas spoke about that automated allocation system. While ladies' western clothing is the same across the country, but you'll find
Body types differ.
body types are very different. So in Northeast, you will sell lot of small and extra small sizes. Whereas, quite obviously, when you come to North India, a lot of large and extra large. Similarly, you would find states where the color of the skin is lighter. You would sell a lot of, bold dark colors like red and bright blue and so on and so forth. And the states where the skin colors are somewhat darker, you will sell more earthy colors, rust and brown, and so on and so forth. So, what this automated system does is that it is sensitive to the local both requirements and preferences. I would submit that we thrive on similarities and we have to take the differences in our stride in the way we conduct our business.
And Arijit, here GK is talking about replenishment. Even the initial stock that goes out. So in the initial, let's say you're sending 20 things to Guwahati, right? That stack of 20 would have more extra smalls and smalls that's going to the Northeast versus if you're sending it
Punjab, for
to
example.
Punjab,
Yeah.
it would be fewer extra smalls and smalls.
Correct.
And all of that is automated. That's the
Fully automated.
that goes
That's
back to the codified
codified
piece that we were talking about.
And this is what I was saying, only we as a retail company have it in the world.
In the world.
Yes.
Wow.
It's homegrown, it's developed.
Yeah.
We've developed it.
Yeah. But Nishant, tell me, in the last 15 years, I mean, I know Kedaara came into the picture in 8 years ago, but even before that, and GK can also come in, we've seen how this entire retail industry getting disrupted thanks to e-commerce. Now, e-commerce has a new avatar.
Quick commerce. Yeah.
So how does Vishal deal with this, or dealt with e-commerce and now dealing with quick commerce?
No, I think it's a great question. Again, I think the business, in some ways, the resilience of the business is reflected when you have new entrants, whether it was e-commerce, omni-channel earlier, or quick commerce. At that point in time, thanks to COVID, I think
Yeah.
crisis into opportunity, to what Manas said earlier, we started, delivering from stores, right? We were using the store both as a dark store as well as a store which was serving customers walking in. And that sort of created an additional revenue opportunity to serve that catchment, open up new customers who could try our merchandise. So that was, one example of that.
Was that how it got initiated, the whole e-commerce?
Yes, that's how it got initiated at the time of COVID. And then on quick commerce, I think the interesting part, Arijit, there are two aspects, right? Number one, quick commerce is largely focused today, at least, on
Urban India.
third-party brands and urban India, right? We're the exact opposite of that.
Opposite.
We are own brands predominantly and tier 3, tier 4 India, right? Places like Upper Tehri and Jhargram, which I think no one in quick commerce has ever seen yet, right? The eventual competitive advantage and moat is really customers want value, right? There's a reason why they're shopping more and more of First Crop, which is our own brand, or, Pink Almira, or whatever the case may be, right? So therefore, that has enabled us to really, not get impacted by quick commerce much. I mean, GK can obviously elaborate much more, but our stores in Gurgaon, right, which are on the other side of a lot of them on, the other side of NH, they're growing, at the same pace, right? Despite quick commerce existing in those markets.
How is that possible?
So let me give you an example. We sell full crop chocolate biscuits, which are called Bourbon biscuits, made by McVitie's, by the way, which is an Australian multinational company.
And they sell as McVitie's also elsewhere. I mean, they have their own, and they also manufacture for you.
Yeah, they manufacture for us and they develop for us. So we sell them for 16 rupees. The market leader in that category sells at 36 rupees. You could argue that McVitie's in terms of quality would be, if anything, better. But let's assume it's the same. Now, even if the advantage in quick commerce on big discounting days is 20%, the price would come down to 28 rupees. But if my customers were to buy 10 things from quick commerce, each of which is 70-80% higher in price, despite that discounting, they would not be able to afford what they are buying. So it is a fact, as Nishant said, that to the best of our knowledge, we've not lost any customer to quick commerce. But alongside, we also have a quick commerce business which is fully available in Gurgaon right now.
But is it just biscuits where you see that?
No,
price gap, or is
it's
it
shampoo, it's noodles. I'll give you the example of noodles made by Indonesian noodles. Again, not less in quality. The market leader sells at 16 rupees for a 70-gram packet. We are at 9 rupees.
But what about other categories? What about like personal products, personal care, home
We
care?
have our own brands there.
Right. And they're also the
exactly the same price equation.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying if you were to buy your range of FMCG that you buy every month from anywhere rather than Vishal, you'll pay a lot more.
Right. We are running out of time, Manas. I wanted to just step back and go to, around 2010, when I think you were in TPG, and probably that helped you to make up your mind when you moved to Partners that, to make that decision 8 years ago that I know this company, I think there's still more potential. Let me enjoy the ride for a longer period.
Absolutely. So I remember first running into GK outside the Bombay airport, the old Bombay airport, Mumbai airport. And I walked up to him and I introduced myself because the original Vishal transaction hadn't closed yet. Yeah. And GK was doing the back and forth from Delhi to Bombay. And I cannot take any credit for that journey. I was not part of the team. But then
you saw it.
I saw it. I had a ringside view. Yeah. And I saw how hard GK and the Amol and the TPG team really worked on it. And then in 2016, December, I had taken 2 weeks off because I had a ton of vacation. And then I just randomly reached out to GK and we had a 3 or 4 hour coffee at Oberoi.
Oberoi.
Right. It was random. And we discussed everything
many coffees.
I guess. Many coffees. And it was totally random. We discussed that book on Buddha that you spoke
Mostly
about.
We discussed that.
Mostly we discussed randomly spiritual stuff. And then at the end of the meeting, GK said that, maybe at some point TPG would be. And so that led one thing to another. And then, of course, we love working together, Nishant and I. So that, it was like, baat aage badhti chali gayi, karwan badhta gaya, right? And we all kind of got together and we managed to, and the level of conviction that we had in GK, the team, once we got to know the team, the business, the Lego blocks that had all been come into place to build that business, the 48, the 50, 25, 25 roughly that you were talking about between apparel, GM and FMCG, GK calls it the shape of the business. Right? The shape of the business and hence the unit economics of the business was largely aligned. So you're absolutely right. Sometimes some of these things, when you've seen it over a period of time, it just gives you so much conviction to say we can go in with confidence. And that's how we were able to really bang the table.
But you started doing the homework much before you actually did the deal in Partners, right?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Like a year and a half before that, GK. Yeah. I mean, I actually went and met my old friends and tried to do something a little bit more bilaterally. We were shooed away. But we kept at it. right? We kept at it, and we made sure we had the right set of people around us to be able to do it together. And yeah, exactly.
So I remember one of you telling me that you guys did the Avas trade. You guys went for a walk, and that's where I think Rene was also mentioning that, and that's where you brainstormed and you cleared all the doubts. Did something similar happen in Vishal as well?
So in Vishal, Manas obviously called, right? In Avas, we'd obviously had the
Yeah.
privilege of working together. And because Manas had a ringside view, obviously knew GK really well.
Correct.
We hadn't done much in retail until that point, right? I mean, we had done, I think Manevar had happened by then.
Much later.
Yeah, Manevar happened in 2017, actually. So
Right.
it happened a year before we invested in Vishal. But we started building sort of understanding of retail and different categories. But, to what Manas described, I think as soon as we met with GK and the team and saw the stores, really understood the story, and more than the numbers, the story behind the numbers,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Which is
The value
always the most
proposition,
important.
the-
I mean,
yeah.
storytelling is one aspect of what we do, but the story really sort of is the more important part. It was clear that this is something which is, a winner, right? And that's how it all came together.
But how did you convince your investors? Because if I'm someone sitting in Singapore or in New York, I would say great, great potential, Nishant, but this is a restricted sector. You have, but you still have foreign companies. You also have deep pocket rivals. How do you stand out? How do you make money? So how did you convince your own limited LPs?
So I think the conviction obviously starts with us, Arijit, right? I
Correct.
mean, our LPs
Starts with
obviously
you, yeah.
trust us to make the right calls. So in some ways, more than convincing the LPs, it was really about convincing the investment committee, which, I'm part of. But I think at some level, we've talked about this during the course of this conversation. Really large, TAM is serving the biggest segment of Bharat in many ways, right? So
True.
there was massive, massive opportunity. We were 200 stores, looking at many, many more in the future. It was a box model which had consistent unit economics, irrespective of tier 2, tier
Yep.
3, tier 4, northeast, south, north, whichever, region you put. So there was a lot of consistency around that, which made it easier.
And growth largely funded by internal accruals.
Growth all funded by internal growth. And most importantly, I think that the last point is most important, which is the team, right?
Yeah.
GK having done that from the beginning,
Correct.
knowing exactly what works, what doesn't work, the team which had been around for a really long time. I think all those three things really came through both in qualitative assessment as well as in the numbers that, we obviously analyzed to death beyond a point.
And you get the last word. What convinced you? I remember ages ago you had told me, I'm bored because organized retail looks at the same 6 cities, and in those same 6 cities, there are the same 6 malls. So, it's beyond a point, it gets boring. So, when guys from TPG first approached you, what convinced you that yes, Vishal is where my journey, this is where the new innings will be?
So, I would say that I was involved in the process for 1.5 years before this deal happened.
Yeah.
And
Dealing with banks and
Yeah,
the
all of it.
creditors. Yeah.
Building conviction about Vishal,
Correct.
because there wasn't anything optically which was very convincing about Vishal. It was a totally bankrupt business in every which way. But that is where the 6 city example came, because there was a belief in India that organized retail may not work in India. It's too early and you may never make money. That's the story which I told you. When we looked around, and I was with retail for a few years before that. And, when you look at the role which organized retail played in, let's say in America, it wasn't quite happening in India, because there the societal role of organized retail was to make things cheaper for the less affluent and in a way get consumption going. Now, the 6 cities, 6 mall model wasn't doing that. It was totally focused on the upper middle income group India at rentals which was so expensive that the malls needed to get footfall of thousands of people 24/7 for those stores to survive. And we said that this does not mean that organized retailing cannot work in India. This just means that you have to go back to the first principles and see if you can create relevance for Indian society at large by making things more affordable.
And did your experience or stint in Africa help? Because very similar market dynamics, very similar, perhaps similar demographic profiles as well.
See, that was, of course, there is something that you learn from every
True.
stint that you do. But, the fast moving consumer good and retail space is quite different, because there you are dealing more with consumers. What I mean by that is that there the lady, when she's using the shampoo, becomes very important. Whereas in retail, you could be dealing with the same lady, but as a customer, she's in the store trying things, buying things, choosing things. So while there are some overlaps, but essentially the businesses are very different.
We can really go on and on, but it's been really fascinating, to talk and discuss and hear these stories. Today, you've crossed an important milestone. I'm sure there are many more to come. Congratulations once again to all three of you. Thank you, GK. Thank you, Nishant. Thanks, Manas.
Thank you, Arijit.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Arijit.
joining.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Really
having
enjoyed
us
the
back.
conversation.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
That's it for today. You were listening to the Economic Times podcast, The Morning Brief. It was produced by Anirban Chaudhary, Sarohini Jain, and Vinay Joshi. Sound designed by Rajas Naik and Amrit Negi. It streams on Amazon Prime Music, JioSaavn, Spotify, Apple, and of course ET's own audio platform, ET Play, plus all your favorite audio streaming platforms. Hope you had a good time listening to this episode as much as we did while producing it. Till then, from all of us, it's goodbye and good luck.